Toxic Charity: How Churches and Charities Hurt Those They Help, and How to Reverse It, is a book by Robert D. Lupton that challenges the traditional approach to charity work and philanthropy. Lupton argues that many charitable efforts actually do more harm than good, perpetuating dependency and hindering self-sufficiency. Instead, he proposes a new model of charity that focuses on empowering individuals and communities to become self-reliant. Lupton is a community organizer and founder of Focused Community Strategies, FCS, a nonprofit organization that seeks to develop neighborhoods from within by empowering residents to take control of their own lives. Throughout the book, Lupton draws on his experiences working with the poor in Atlanta and other cities to illustrate his points. The book is divided into 3 parts. In Part 1, Lupton lays out his argument that much of what passes for charity work in the United States is actually counterproductive and can be harmful to the people it is meant to help. He argues that the traditional model of charity, which involves providing handouts and services to those in need, creates a culture of dependency and often reinforces negative stereotypes about the poor. Lupton also suggests that many charitable organizations are more focused on serving their own needs than on actually helping those in need. In Part 2, Lupton offers an alternative model of charity that he calls asset-based community development. This approach involves working with residents of poor communities to help them identify their own strengths and assets, and to develop their own solutions to the challenges they face. Lupton argues that this approach can be more effective than traditional charity because it builds self-reliance and empowers communities to take control of their own destinies. In Part 3, Lupton offers practical advice for those who want to implement the asset-based community development model. He suggests that organizations should focus on building relationships with residents of poor communities, and should be willing to work alongside them as partners rather than as providers of services. He also emphasizes the importance of humility, listening, and learning from the people one is trying to help. Overall, Toxic Charity is a thought-provoking book that challenges readers to think critically about the traditional approach to charity work. Lupton's argument is well supported by his own experiences and by research from a variety of sources. While his alternative model of charity may not be a panacea, it is a useful starting point for anyone who wants to make a positive impact on the world. Part 1, The Problem. Chapter 1, The Dilemma of Charity. In the opening chapter of Toxic Charity, Lupton lays out the central dilemma of traditional charity work: it often does more harm than good. He argues that the traditional model of charity, which involves providing handouts and services to those in need, creates a culture of dependency and often reinforces negative stereotypes about the poor. Lupton also suggests that many charitable organizations are more focused on serving their own needs than on actually helping those in need. Lupton begins by describing a mission trip he took to Mexico in which his group built a house for a family in need. Although the group felt good about what they had accomplished, Lupton began to question the long-term impact of their work. He realized that the family would still be living in poverty after the group left, and that the group had done little to address the underlying causes of their poverty. Lupton goes on to argue that traditional charity work often creates a cycle of dependency that is hard to break. When people receive handouts and services without having to work for them, they begin to expect them as a right rather than as a gift. This can lead to feelings of entitlement and a lack of motivation to improve one's own situation. Lupton also notes that traditional charity work can reinforce negative stereotypes about the poor. When people are treated as victims who are helpless without the aid of others, they may internalize these stereotypes and begin to see themselves as powerless and incompetent. This can be damaging to their self-esteem and can hinder their efforts to improve their own lives. Finally, Lupton argues that many charitable organizations are more focused on serving their own needs than on actually helping those in need. He suggests that charities may be more interested in maintaining their own programs and funding than in finding long-term solutions to poverty. This can lead to a disconnect between the needs of those being served and the actions of the charitable organizations that claim to be helping them. Chapter 2, The Irony of Service. In this chapter, Lupton expands on the theme of the previous chapter by exploring the irony of service. He argues that traditional charity work often serves the needs of the volunteers and organizations involved more than the needs of the people they are trying to help. Lupton notes that many people get involved in charity work because they want to feel good about themselves and make a difference in the world. While these motivations are understandable, they can sometimes lead to actions that are counterproductive or even harmful. For example, volunteers may engage in poverty tourism by visiting poor communities without actually doing anything to help improve the lives of those who live there. This can be insulting and exploitative to the residents of these communities. Lupton also notes that many charitable organizations are more focused on serving their own needs than on actually helping those in need. He suggests that charities may be more interested in maintaining their own programs and funding than in finding long-term solutions to poverty. This can lead to a disconnect between the needs of those being served and the actions of the charitable organizations that claim to be helping them. Chapter 3, When Helping Hurts. In this chapter, Lupton explores the ways in which traditional charity work can actually harm the people it is meant to help. He argues that the cycle of dependency created by traditional charity work can be damaging to the self-esteem and motivation of those receiving aid. Lupton notes that when people receive handouts and services without having to work for them, they may begin to feel entitled to them. This can lead to a lack of motivation to improve their own situation, as well as resentment towards those who provide the aid. In addition, traditional charity work can reinforce negative stereotypes about the poor, portraying them as helpless victims who are unable to improve their own lives. Lupton suggests that a better approach to charity work would be to focus on empowering individuals and communities to become self-reliant. This would involve working with them to identify their own strengths and assets, and to develop their own solutions to the challenges they face. By doing so, people would be more invested in their own success and would be more likely to take ownership of their own lives. Chapter 4, The Necessity of Aid. In this chapter, Lupton acknowledges that aid is sometimes necessary to help people in crisis. However, he argues that traditional charity work is often not the most effective way to provide aid. Lupton notes that traditional charity work often focuses on providing short-term relief rather than addressing the underlying causes of poverty. This can lead to a cycle of dependency in which people become reliant on aid rather than developing the skills and resources they need to become self-reliant. In addition, traditional charity work can be expensive and inefficient, with much of the aid going to administrative costs rather than to those in need. Lupton suggests that a better approach to aid would be to focus on building relationships with those in need and working alongside them as partners rather than as providers of services. This would involve listening to their needs and working with them to identify their own strengths and assets. Lupton also suggests that aid should be focused on helping people to become self-reliant rather than simply providing handouts. Chapter 5, Good Intentions Are Not Enough. In this chapter, Lupton explores the ways in which good intentions can actually be harmful when it comes to charity work. He argues that well-intentioned people often make assumptions about the needs of those they are trying to help without actually taking the time to understand their unique circumstances. Lupton notes that many people who engage in charity work assume that they know what is best for those they are trying to help, without actually consulting with them or taking their input into account. This can lead to actions that are ineffective or even harmful. For example, providing food aid without taking into account cultural preferences or dietary restrictions can be wasteful and insulting. Lupton suggests that a better approach to charity work would be to start by listening to the needs and desires of those being served. By doing so, charitable organizations can better understand the unique circumstances of each community and tailor their actions accordingly. Chapter 6, Systems and Structures. In this chapter, Lupton argues that traditional charity work often fails to address the root causes of poverty, which are often related to larger systems and structures that are beyond the control of individuals and communities. Lupton notes that poverty is often the result of larger social and economic systems that perpetuate inequality and marginalization. For example, lack of access to education, healthcare, and job opportunities can keep people trapped in poverty for generations. Lupton suggests that charitable organizations should focus on addressing these larger systems and structures, rather than simply providing handouts or services. This would involve advocating for policy changes, working with government agencies and other organizations to address systemic issues, and promoting social justice. Chapter 7, A Better Way. In this final chapter, Lupton offers a vision for a better approach to charity work. He suggests that this approach would involve focusing on building relationships with those in need and working with them as partners rather than as providers of services. It would also involve empowering individuals and communities to become self-reliant and to develop their own solutions to the challenges they face. Lupton notes that this approach would require a significant shift in the way that charitable organizations operate. It would involve moving away from a focus on short-term relief and towards a focus on long-term development. It would also require a greater emphasis on advocacy and social justice. Overall, Lupton's book provides a thought-provoking critique of traditional charity work and offers a compelling vision for a better way forward. By focusing on empowering individuals and communities to become self-reliant and by addressing the root causes of poverty, charitable organizations can make a real difference in the lives of those they serve. In addition to his critique of traditional charity work, Lupton also offers a number of practical suggestions for how charitable organizations can shift their approach. He suggests that charitable organizations should focus on building partnerships with those they serve, working with them to identify their own strengths and assets, and empowering them to develop their own solutions to the challenges they face. Lupton also emphasizes the importance of collaboration and networking between charitable organizations. He notes that by working together, organizations can leverage their resources and expertise to have a greater impact. One of the key takeaways from Lupton's book is the importance of humility in charity work. Lupton notes that well-intentioned people often come into charity work with a sense of superiority and a belief that they know what is best for those they are trying to help. This can lead to actions that are insensitive or even harmful. By approaching charity work with humility and a willingness to listen and learn from those they serve, charitable organizations can have a greater impact and avoid unintended consequences. Finally, Lupton's book raises important questions about the role of charity in society. He suggests that charitable organizations should not be seen as a replacement for government services or as a way to address systemic issues on their own. Rather, charitable organizations should work in partnership with government agencies, businesses, and other organizations to address the root causes of poverty and inequality. In conclusion, Toxic Charity is a thought-provoking and challenging book that raises important questions about the role of charity in society. By offering a critique of traditional charity work and a compelling vision for a better way forward, Lupton challenges charitable organizations to rethink their approach and to focus on empowering individuals and communities to become self-reliant and to address the root causes of poverty. Are you tired of traditional charity work that seems to do more harm than good? Do you want to make a real difference in the lives of those you serve? If so, Toxic Charity by Robert D. Lupton is a must-read. In this thought-provoking book, Lupton offers a compelling critique of traditional charity work and a vision for a better way forward. By focusing on empowering individuals and communities to become self-reliant and addressing the root causes of poverty, charitable organizations can have a greater impact and make a real difference in the world. Click the link in the description to get your copy today and join the movement towards a more effective and empowering approach to charity work.